Jayson Tatum is your all-star MVP. Jaylen Brown looks just straight up awesome in his new mask there, and we're now approaching the critical final stretch run of the season. The Athletics' Jared Weiss joins us to talk all about it next on First to the Floor.
Who's going to be first to the floor here? And it was Marcus Smart, as he usually is.
Brown drives, scoop layup off the glass.
That's not the first time we've seen a superstar in green and white sacrifice the body.
Garnett, knocked away.
Hey, welcome into another episode of First to the Floor. Ben Vallis here. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're doing well. We've got Jake Eisenberg with us, as he often is, but today we're very excited to welcome a very special guest from The Athletic. It's Jared Weiss. Jared, joining us from a car somewhere in the United States of America. How you doing, man? Thanks for coming on.
I'm good. Yeah, somewhere in the U.S. is accurate. I don't think we know where it is.
We like to specifically geographically pinpoint all of our guests before we get going. So nice to write up.
I'll send you my latitude coordinates.
Please do. It's a requirement for all guests. Look, we've got plenty to get to here, coming off the back of what was really a Celtics fan's delight, and then not much of anything to anyone else if you're a fan of any other team. Jared, the AllStar Game, quite a production yesterday, we'll say, quite lengthy. Let's start with the good here. What were the best parts of the game yesterday?
A part. I think it's a singular, right? It was just that battle between Tatum and Jaylen Brown. That was actually fun for brief periods of time, and they weren't even fully defending each other. They would stay in front of each other, but wouldn't really contest the shot. I think JT gave JB a good contest at a buzzer beater at the end of the third quarter. But I mean, come on, guys, the AllStar Game is trash. We know this. Putting in the Elam ending that first year yielded incredible results. That first one was amazing in the fourth quarter. It sucked until the fourth quarter. That was amazing. This time you could tell the guys just didn't care, and unfortunately, the score was too spread apart for them to really care. But at least JB and JT wanted to kind of get at each other, really break each other down. We saw a few huge dunks from JT that was at least interesting in the fact that JT is pretty consistent with his dunk style, and we saw him break out a few different types of dunks, which was fun. But there was also that photo of LeBron literally running away while JT was throwing it down. So it's not it's not like we got to see any real posters in this one. But so that was the only part I can remember thinking oh, this is actually cool to watch. The rest of it was pretty bland. I'm sure there were a couple interesting moments, but I'm not remembering too many.
Yeah, look, it was the best All-Star Game of all time. Definitely not. But as a Celtics fan, you got all the sound bites of JT and JB talking about how much they love each other. We got some great slow-mo videos of Jaylen coming up to JT, giving them the signature handshake and giving Deuce the butt tap afterwards. And then we got the post-game interview with Tatum with the trophy. And he loved it, right? I'm kind of happy for him. Signature shoe comes out. Everybody's pumped about that. Thankfully, the other colorways have kind of propped up how the shoe actually looks overall. But he was stoked, right? I mean, the Kobe Bryant Award, dropping 55, getting little details Dame telling me, you're on 49, the record's 52. You got to go for it. And look, as much as some guys on WEEI might hate it, these guys kind of care about winning the MVP, and Tatum winning the MVP that's named after Kobe Bryant. It does matter to him. I don't think it matters anywhere near as much as him winning a championship, obviously. But it was I was just happy for Tatum to drop 55 at an All-Star Game. I'm going to convince myself that him knocking down 8 pull-up threes is the beginning of his pull-up three numbers starting to come up. So
please go.
Yeah, please to the Lords, let this be the beginning of the pull-up threes starting to fall. But yeah, as far as taking away too much from this, not too much to glean. I mean, the whole thing was 17 hours long, from the draft all the way through. Thankfully, I was watching on delay, so I got to kind of fast forward through some of the interviews and stuff. But the longest broadcast of all time. Joe Mazzulla still manages to play Tatum 35 minutes, which is which is impressive. It was a light 35 at least.
What did the 35 include the Elam ending? Because there's no clock running on that.
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a great
question. Yeah, so he really played 45 minutes.
That is good.
But
yeah,
they're also not playing. So it
No,
didn't.
totally.
I can't imagine. I don't think he even broke a sweat. So it doesn't matter. He could have played in the entire game. It wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah,
it
Luka
was good.
Doncic still managed to seem completely gassed despite the lack of effort from all players on the court. But yeah, like the length of it, like even, and we can use this to traverse to the next section, which is the obvious question. What were the bad elements of the All-Star game? Jewel taking the piss there with the length of the national anthem. Like no disrespect to the national anthem, but she really drew that thing out. And I'm a big over-under during the Super Bowl on the length of the national anthem. Better. That's like the one bet that I make. Jewel was obviously had some money behind the over on that one because she really dragged that thing on. Jared, I mean, we've touched on a few elements here, but what were the sort of more obvious negatives of this particular All-Star game?
And I should also say the halftime show was good. You know, Burna Boy like phoned it in, but at least Thames and Remo were good. So at least the halftime show was enjoyable. But I mean, the draft was fun, and I know that they did the reserves first so that they got rid of the whole picking guys last thing. But would Lauri Markkanen have gone last if the reserves are going at the end and he was still a reserve? I feel like it ended up with you going the same way as we could have imagined. Yeah, and also Jokic basically saying screw Lauri Markkanen, I'm not going last, and just walking around LeBron's team is hilarious. He claimed that he didn't see Lauri was still there. And it'd be a classic thing for no one to notice a Utah Jazz All-Star at the Utah Jazz All-Star game. So that was pretty hilarious. Jokic has great vision. I can't imagine he missed Lauri standing over there. So I that was really hilarious. But the draft, I guess the draft was fine. It was fine. It was fun. Especially when you see some of the guys getting picked looking like they're doing a passive aggressive handshake. So that part was fun. And thank God they were doing it in front of everybody. And also shout out to Giannis for screwing up and picking John Moran.
Yeah, that's
supposed
amazing.
to. That was funny. So I guess the draft, I'd say, was the positive. It was just that the game itself is these guys could step up the level of play a little bit, and it would be so much more entertaining because they're just not defending at all, and they're not running any plays whatsoever. And it seemed like it just seemed like they didn't want to try to make it feel like a game at all, and they were just trying to get shots up like it's a layup line. I thought Jaylen described it best when he said it was a glorified layup line. I feel like in the past it hasn't been quite that bad. It's usually like some semblance of execution and just like they're not closing out hard, they're not contesting hard, stuff like that. But like whenever somebody would go to the rim, there was nobody getting met at the rim. And honestly, I know I had a few people text me like, "Oh, it's so great to have an All-Star game without Rudy Gobert." But honestly, if Rudy Gobert was out there, what is he going to do besides trying to stop shots at the rim? So that actually would have probably been more fun because at least he would have taken playing defense seriously. And so I thought we really lost out on some of that stuff. Also, a lot of the guys playing were hurt, and a lot of them were stars. Like LeBron and Giannis got out of there quickly. Joel Embiid isn't fully healthy, so he wasn't really trying to do it. Jaylen was healthy. Jaylen was not healthy. He was, getting back from the injury, and he really went for it because he was someone who really needed to take advantage of that spotlight. And I kind of wish, honestly, that they had more injury replacements for some of these guys that were a little bit banged up, so that we could have gotten some people that really cared about being there, as opposed to like a LeBron, who obviously has been there 1,000 times at this point, and they're doing ceremonies for him constantly, so it's not like he's really cherishing the moment. And Giannis has done it plenty of times. We know Giannis cares more about the playoffs than anything, so it's not like he's going to go crazy in the All-Star game. But it would have been nice if we had some of the guys that maybe this is their only All-Star game they're ever going to make, or someone like Jaylen who's trying to prove himself that he's a superstar rather than just a star. I think that we would have seen more quality basketball if we had more of those guys there.
Yeah, this has got to be one of the worst I can remember as far as defense being played goes. I don't know how you fix it. I know Shea was talking about, money talks. Not the best look when all these dudes are making like $40 million just on the contract alone. It's like, yeah. And you're right, Jared. Like it would not take much to make it slightly more entertaining. Like just a little bit of defense would go so far. Maybe you got to put in like each team you got to have a Marcus Smart, you got to have a Pat Beverly, just a couple of guys that like are going to try. And that's the thing. Giannis was injured. He often sets the tone for a bit of effort, I feel. And he had that one dunk and then went out. And if you're going to play injured, let guys that want to play in the All-Star game actually play as opposed to just playing 2 or 3 minutes. That was kind of a bummer. But yeah, also I think the outrage is a little too strong. Like I kind of understand these guys not wanting to get injured in a meaningless game. Like, you know, there's one goal, and it's get out to the playoffs healthy. And so I understand not wanting to go too hard, but there's definitely a happy medium in between what we saw last night and today, because it does take a little bit of a shine off.
And one thing I'd wonder is the Kemba Locker situation, how much that affects these guys. That, Kemba, like for people who don't remember, Kemba played a lot of minutes in the All-Star game when he had some knee soreness, and then like his career fell apart after that. Totally. And so I remember bringing that up to somebody with the Celtics recently, and they're like, obviously Kemba's knee did not go to shit because of that one game, which is obvious. Like he's playing 35 minutes a night, then he plays one extra game after several days of rest where they're not even going 100% the entire time, and that's what caused it to happen. No, of course not. But I think it at least was a reminder of what can go wrong, and that like these guys, they have so much money on the line that it's funny because it's like you play, like guys get hurt in practice, and guys go hard in practice all the time, right? So like you can be super competitive in a game that doesn't count. But I think it's the idea of that there's just something about the All-Star game that they just don't take it seriously because it's this exhibition of pomp and circumstance. And I don't know, like right now their incentive is charity, right? They're trying to like raise money for charity with the shots they're hitting late in the quarters. And so that's how they're trying to incentivize these guys. But like, did it really seem like that was incentivizing guys to launch threes, but did it seem like it was incentivizing them to play competitive basketball? The Elam ending that first time around, for some reason, it was because the game was close and because it was this new thing, it seemed like it got guys to go off the wall. And that was like some of the greatest basketball I've ever played, because it was like all the best players at the same time on the same place actually playing hard. I would love to see them get a big purse prize together of like the winning team gets to split like $10 million or something like that. And maybe that would motivate these guys more, because donating to charity clearly didn't do it for them. And maybe if the money goes in their pocket, or maybe if they make like some sort of like special Richard Mill watch or something like that for the winner that they could win, maybe that would be it. Maybe it's because they're making rings, I think, for everybody participating, but maybe if they were able to get some sort of special trophy out of it that was actually pretty cool and unique that only the winner gets, maybe that would motivate them more.
One diamond in the ring for every block or defensive play at the during the game.
Yes, exactly. Every stock gets you like 20K. That's and then we're cooking with gas. Okay, that's probably enough on the awesome All-Star game that we experienced yesterday. The Jordan Tatum ones were announced yesterday. Tatum displaying them. The pink lemonade. I'm never going to be good enough at basketball to ever wear the pink lemonade colorway in a basketball game, but they're probably my favorite colorway. Jared, you a shoe guy? What did you think of the shoes?
I like them. I mean, the funny thing was, I remember when JT said that's not the real shoe. It's going to be different than that. And I mean, I haven't examined it closely enough, but it looks like it's the same damn shoe. So
100%. Yes.
Yeah, it was that shoe. The window on the outsole doesn't strike me. It's a little bit awkward. I mean, it's better than like when the Zions dropped, and the Zions had like they awkwardly tried to work the Z in there, and I thought they honestly just looked like Marshall's shoes. I don't know if that works for you guys. They look like the Marshall's is like a department store in the US that has name brand stuff that's all like knockoff versions of name brand stuff that they put the name on anyway. And that's what Zion shoes kind of look like to me. These definitely look nicer. And I mean, they kind of look like LeBron's a little bit to me. And I think that's a good thing. I think LeBron has always had my favorite shoes. Like I wear the LeBron 15s all the time. Nice. I don't understand what they're trying to do with the window on the side. It's an awkward shape, and I don't know what's in there. It's like it kind of looks like an airbag, but it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing like an airbag. So that's gonna be like, is there zoom in there? Like I can't even tell. and maybe they'll get creative with what they're putting in there, but otherwise, I like I like the upper, I like the fabric, I like the heel. I think all that's good. It's just like that big window is the thing that sticks out. And it just I'm not clear on what the purpose of it is right now.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love Jayson Tatum. It could have been a turd with a soul on the bottom of it, and I would buy them and wear them in every basketball game that I play. But an elite business move either way, regardless, for Jayson Tatum to debut them in the All-Star game that he went on to score, a record number 55 points and win the MVP. So a very baller move, literally there by Jayson Tatum. We should move on, Jared, and dust our hands of that relatively boring All-Star game. Celebrate the fact that it was amazing for Celtics fans, but like we said, terrible for everyone else. Let's take a look at the season ahead. We're at the sort of the final stretch run here. How do you see the final stretch of the season playing out? Like, did the Celtics finish with the 1 seed? Looks like they've got the 10th hardest remaining schedule per strength of schedule. The Bucks have the 11th. Take from that what you will. How do you see the rest of this season playing out for the C's?
I mean, depends on what happens in that game in March at Milwaukee, right? You see these two teams are right next to each other. Boston probably has a depth advantage as far as that when their main guys are sitting, they have a lot of playmakers that can step in for them. So they've been pretty good with that. When Giannis is sitting, it's like really hard for Milwaukee to replicate what he's doing. Because they just don't have the playmaking depth coming off the bench. But Drew Holiday's having an amazing season, so that's really helped. That's really helped them deal with Chris Middleton not being fully ready yet. So, I mean, Milwaukee, if Chris Middleton continues to improve, or I guess improves over the stretch run, that might make them a little bit stronger. Maybe Jay Crowder's addition is going to be a difference maker for them, but it just seems like Boston has been the better team by a hair, I guess. And I would expect them to finish with the 1 seed. They've already had a lot of guys miss a lot of time that are coming back. So I don't think they're going to be, it seems like they're not going to be missing bodies as much in the second half of the season. You never know. Guys can get hurt again. But usually, once a guy gets hurt and he comes back, he doesn't get hurt again. Like, I don't know why, because it's technically all random, right? But, I mean, I assume Boston's going to have decent health going down the stretch. And maybe they'll start resting guys a little bit more. But they're used to the resting patterns, right? Like, their bigs switch off games on back-to-back, stuff like that. Jaylen's always in and out of the lineup. It's like they're used to getting by with guys resting, and their whole next man up thing, which is a mentality that every team in the history of sports has. So it's not like it's like the special thing the Celtics have, but they've been good at bringing guys up the depth chart and still executing pretty well. So they're in pole position, and they should stay in pole position.
Yeah, what I like, and I'm forgetting his name. It's the Dunker Spot Pod, Nikias Duncan, and the co-host, last name Jones.
Steve Jones.
Steve Jones, thank you. One of his favorite Steve Jones-isms is sometimes you're an injury away from really figuring something out or unlocking something on a part of your roster that you didn't know otherwise. And as frustrating and tough as it's been to be missing Marcus and Jaylen, what that has meant is that Derek White has gone to a completely new level and really found himself over this stretch. Obviously, he's not going to have the same usage now that Marcus Smart's back, but the level of confidence that he's playing with, the level of aggressiveness that he's been playing with, if he can continue to play, that way, I think that's going to have a really positive impact. And it meant that we had no choice but to play Sam Hauser. Like, his minutes had really, really been cut, and he's back. Like, especially you look at that Milwaukee game, Hauser was absolutely cooking. The fact that Hauser's back, Muscala's come in. They've got so much shooting now, so much depth, as you said, Jared. That I think that even if they are resting a guy here or there, they have the ability to really crank it up here through the last 20 games. And listening to Tatum in his post-game press conference yesterday, he's like, this is it. This is the time you want to be playing your best basketball, both individually and collectively. And they remember that, from last season, this is, from January post All-Star break, they were crushing teams, and they went into the playoffs as the hottest team in the league, and they got to the finals. So I think that I expect the team, because I think sometimes, we see this team kind of take their foot off the gas at certain points throughout the regular season, which we've seen. But I think there's going to be a collective understanding that this is go time. So I would expect them to push into that 59. I don't know if they'll quite get to 60 wins, but yeah, they're going to be right there with Milwaukee for that 1 seed.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
anyone in the NBA is going to reach 60 wins this year. There's just the
Yeah.
middle class of the league is too deep. And this is not surprising, right? With the play-in and the lottery odds the way they are, you're expecting the middle class to be deeper. It's kind of designed to be that way. And it's funny, I remember at a deadline, a lot of people were saying that because of the play-in, teams aren't going to be willing to part with players as much, and so you might not see much movement. And then we saw like a record busy deadline, right? So, I think that you shouldn't expect to see teams get 60 wins. And I also think that, maybe seeding isn't quite as crucial as it used to be. We've seen teams win on the road. We saw the Celtics win a game 7 on the road. We saw the Celtics lose a game 6 in the finals at home. It's like, I think seeding has continued to decrease in value around the league. I think teams are really valuing rhythm and health more than anything. Because I think teams are just recognizing that guys are going to pick up small knocks throughout the playoffs, and they're going to miss some time throughout the playoffs. And their goals are to make sure that when guys miss a game here or there, they're just missing one game, and they're not losing guys permanently like you did with Chris Middleton. Like maybe the Bucks would have won the championship last year if Chris Middleton was healthy. And so I think that the Celtics, the way they're going to prioritize the stretch here is like just making sure like you got to probably have to rest Al Horford more, right? Because Al Horford's taking on a pretty heavy workload. And like as far as minutes are concerned, and last year he was able to have the stamina to make a deep run, although he kind of lost it a little bit at the end. But that was because he was coming off of that huge break before when he was with OKC, where he basically sat out for January. And it's like, how do you manage his load to get him ready for another deep playoff run when he's been playing the whole season, been playing lots of minutes? And so I think that you're going to see the Celtics prioritize that health going into the stretch and willing to sacrifice seeding a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good point on the seeding. I actually had a look at this because I was trying to convince myself that the 1 seed isn't important now that the Bucks have like caught up to us. And if you look at the last 5 years, last season, Heat and the Suns were the 1 seeds. Year prior, Sixers, Jazz. Year prior, Bucks, Lakers. They won the bubble chip, but that was extreme circumstances where they were able to rest for 6 months for 2 players that probably benefited more than any other team. Yes, the bubble chip still counts, but
it's also no home court advantage.
No home court advantage as well. Yeah. And then 18-19 was Bucks Warriors, Warriors losing that one. And the year previous was Rockets Raptors. And so only team of those last 5 years that was a 1 seed to actually win the title was the Lakers, and that was the bubble championship. So I think that's a really good point. And the Celtics have proved to be an elite road team. Again, this year, their road record is the best in the league. Had some of their best performances in the playoffs last year. Game 6 in Milwaukee, Game 7 in Miami, Game 1 in Golden State. This team doesn't really have much of an issue performing on the road. I have a question for you, Jared. Do you reckon we've seen the best basketball of the Celtics yet? Because we've only seen the starters from last year. Marcus, Jaylen, Jayson, Rob, and Al play 29 total minutes together, I think, the last time I had a look. I feel like there's still room for them to really kind of take it to a new level in this last stretch.
They were so good in that opening 20 games of the season that I can't imagine they can replicate that level of performance. Because they were 18-3 or something like that. So you can't really beat that. But Derek White is playing the best basketball of his career. Marcus Smart this season has been probably the best of his career. JT and JB are probably at their peak. And Rob and Al are the 2 guys that have kind of started to find more of a rhythm as the season has gone on. And so and Malcolm Brogdon has been finally kind of scoring consistently in the 20s as of late. Brogdon hasn't been super consistent this year, and his defense isn't where it needs to be, and his passing vision turns on and off a lot of the time. But the dude's hitting most of the shots that he's taking, at least, and he's getting smarter about the shots he's taking. He's taking less wild shots attacking the rack as he was earlier in the year. So everyone's lining up, I feel like, right now to be playing their best ball. And it's just a matter of everybody being together healthy. So, yeah, they could come out of the All-Star break and rattle off a winning streak here. That's definitely plausible.
Where are you at with Grant Williams, though? Because, and this is of, a special importance given where, Al Horford's at, and you mentioned he didn't have that OKC style break coming into this season. Some people have identified Grant Williams as the possible, even if it's just to half of the degree that Al is, somewhat of an Al replacement. Like, I think everyone this season has either met or exceeded expectations, but Grant has been wildly inconsistent. So where are you at with Grant Williams as far as, his reliability as we look towards the playoffs?
Yeah, Grant is probably the only guy right now that's not in the ideal basketball rhythm, that isn't dealing with injury. And it's been a weird season for Grant because Grant started off so well at the beginning of the year. And it was the moment when Rob came back that screwed things up for him, because Grant was playing with no concern about losing playing time, no concern about whether he was going to be in the closing rotation, all that kind of stuff. He knew his spot was secure because they weren't putting Blake Griffin in instead of him, that's for sure. So when Rob came back, that really screwed up his opportunities. And I think it made him feel like he had to force his way into getting opportunity. And so we saw him start to turn it over, attacking a lot of the time. He had a cold streak. He's been dealing with an arm injury that's like not bad enough to hold him out, but clearly enough to affect him. And so I do wonder, how does Grant recalibrate now that he's had some time off to reflect and cool off and heal up and stuff like that? How does he recalibrate his offensive approach? Because it just hasn't worked for him. And it seems like he's taken a little bit of a step back, and he's really kind of going back to what he was doing, which was lifting up from the corner, spotting up to the corners, spacing the corners to shoot it, lifting up to get those elbow threes, attacking and looking to dish, and then looking to take the floater if the defense kind of sits back off of him and covers up the lane. That's the kind of simple bread and butter stuff that when he was just doing consistently and reliably, it was allowing him to pile up points. And so I think the more that he hones in on that, the more nights he's going to have 12 points and 7 rebounds. And that's the kind of numbers he needs to put up. The shooting has been stable this year. It's been pretty good this year. His defense has been, it's been a little bit inconsistent, but like when Grant's on, he's a really, really good defender. And so, it's not surprised that he's a 4th-year guy who had his role change in the middle of the season, which is going to happen understandably with Rob coming back. So it's not a surprise to see him struggling. And like, our standards for him are higher than like for Sam Hauser. It's like Sam Hauser's similar situation, but like Hauser gets his ass kicked on defense all the time. Hauser can't score at the rim a lot of the time. It's like Grant is able to do so much of what Hauser does and then still go the extra, is way better on defense, is able to make a little bit better on offense. And he's more aggressive than Hauser is. And we're holding him to a higher standard. So it looks like he's struggling in comparison, but in reality, he still is more impactful than Hauser in so many ways. And so I'm still bullish on Grant. Like what we saw from Grant at the beginning of the season, that stuff is there. And I'm sure also defenses saw enough tape of him that they could take away some of the moves that was working well for him. They kind of figured out where they want to force him to shoot from, where they want to reroute him drives, where he like can't get to a shot comfortably, and that's when he throws up wild stuff. But like he'll get better and figure it out over time. So like I hope they keep him, because it's like he's grown so much over these 4 years, and he's still so young that he should continue to evolve his game.
Yeah, I think he's definitely someone that will, whatever the ceiling is he'll hit the ceiling. And with young players, mentally, you see Grant hit a certain level in the playoffs, and you're like, okay, he's going to maintain that level of play through a whole season. But the reality is, he's, as you said, 4th-year guy. There are still going to be bumps in the road. I have a couple of like numbers here. Like Ben, you mentioned the Al Horford replacement light. This is the top post-up numbers per possession, and Horford is allowing the 7th least points per possession for post-ups. And then you look at Grant. He's allowing the highest efficiency on post-ups this year, which I think I've really had a tough time with Grant this year, because on one hand, I think that like the defense being inconsistent is frustrating, because I think that should be something that should be the consistent part. Like, your shot's not falling, the offense isn't there. You can always play hard on defense. But at the same time, you look at the Milwaukee game, you look at the Philadelphia game, and he was fantastic defending both Giannis, Brook Lopez, and Embiid. Really, really effective. And so like that's all that really matters. If I know that he's going to be able to step up in matchups in the playoffs against the Celtics rivals that are going to be there, that's that's all that really matters. I hope that he has taken this week to recalibrate. I think that's a good word. I think he kind of got a little lost in the sauce with when to shoot, when to drive closeouts. Just needs to simplify the approach a little bit offensively and get back to playing a bit more consistently on D.
I'm really
Yeah.
surprised to see those post-up numbers because Grant's a pretty like his post-up technique is really good. He knows how to hit guys, he knows how to leverage guys. He's got a good swipe when guys are making their moves. But it makes sense that tall, like 7-footers that have
Yeah.
a nice turnaround shot, they're gonna get that shot over him. He's gonna make them uncomfortable when they can hit that shot over him. But like Grant isn't meant to be a post-up defender. And in the playoffs, are you really gonna get beat on the block? Maybe. For sure. It depends like who you're facing, obviously. Like obviously against Philly, sure. Against Giannis, he's gonna try to face up Grant. Grant did a pretty good job against Giannis from what I remember in the face-up game. It was mostly Giannis in transition and early offense that really screwed them up. And also when Giannis was the screener on the elbow pick and rolls, that's what really killed them. Because Grant, there's nothing you can do on that one. Giannis is going to dunk over him. Giannis is probably going to dunk over Al too. But like Grant, his main value on defense is his versatility, that they can go into their switch scheme with him at the 5, and especially with him at the 4 and the 3. They can still do that. And he's able to execute a lot of the different pick and roll coverages really well. So when you want to have the switchable defense, which is what they're going to be doing most of the time in the playoffs, that's where he really shows his value there. And then when you need someone that's going to take on pretty much any power perimeter player, he's able to handle that. So that's definitely a vulnerability for him on the block, but he's been better against guards up in space this year. His closeouts have been pretty decent this year. I still think Grant is continuing to improve as a defender.
Yeah, absolutely. Just zooming out a little bit here, Jared, are the vibes as good with this team as they appear through the TV? Like we talked to Abby Chin earlier in this season, and she said the vibes are uniquely special this year for this particular team. You've been covering the team since 2011. From your perspective, like, does this team have that sort of unique specialness that Abby spoke about?
This is really high up there. I think the year that they made that run with Isaiah Thomas, that was like a comparable level of vibes. And I mean, that team had its troubles because like Jay Crowder was a very polarizing locker room presence. Like he was very intense. But I think they love Jay, but Jay just could be a pain in the ass. But Smart is certainly an antagonizer for sure, but I haven't really noticed that happening much this year. This team, so like they started off so good, and they knew that they had to hold together for Joe, that they didn't face any attrition for a while. Like it took them a while to face actual adversity. That West Coast trip where they were losing in LA and San Francisco, that was the first bit of adversity they had. And at least that one, they were pissed off, but they're like, all right, this is a hard West Coast swing. Then they came home and Orlando kicked their ass, and it was like, okay, now we're actually starting to get annoyed. And I don't remember any finger pointing there. I don't remember any questioning about Joe's ability to lead them through that moment. And they kind of regrouped pretty well after that. And they've only had like a couple bad weeks since then. And I think that while they're not quite dominating in the same way that they were at the beginning, but they have consistently won ugly games. And I think it's it's easy to forget that like teams that win 60 games, it's not like unless you're the Warriors, it's not like you're looking amazing the entire time. Like you kind of have to trudge your way to that. Basketball's ugly. The league is basketball. That's how I would say. Winning can be ugly. And this league is more even than it has been in the past. So like most nights are going to be tough games. And I think that Boston fans tend to take a lot of a first person view on how your team is performing, when in reality it's like the opponent is making your life more difficult than you are making your life difficult for yourself. And so I think Celtics fans will often feel like the team is playing poorly, when in reality they're just facing a decent team that makes life harder for them, and you're not going to look perfect and hum consistently throughout the season. And so looking at that, I feel like the team is in a pretty good spot from their on-court execution. And when they win ugly games, I think a lot of the time it's just because they have really good communication, and they seem to trust each other and respect each other in a way that they haven't in the past. And maybe that's just because like the Jays are at a point in their careers where they don't have to really prove themselves anymore. Like I know we kind of talked about that with Jaylen in the
Mhm.
All-Star game before, but like Jaylen, whatever left or whatever more he has to do to prove himself, like Jaylen's proven. We know Jaylen's a star. We know he's a great scorer. Smart is very comfortable where he is at this point. I don't know if Rob is like emotionally processing when he's on the floor. I think he's just a robot.
Totally.
He's just a robot. He sees the ball and he goes for the ball. That's all he does. It's
Uh-huh.
like so. I don't really know what Rob's emotional journey is at this point, but like I don't get the sense that Al has to be the dad anymore. I think
Mhm.
that's a big thing. Is like there's not a lot of Al, telling everyone, all right, sit down and shut up. Let's go over what it means to be an NBA player anymore. They seem to be pretty self sufficient, and that just makes life easier because there's not much infighting about who's the leader of this team anymore.
Yeah, I think these guys have been together for so long now. Marcus, Jaylen, Jayson, and Al as well, even though he had that Philadelphia spy mission for a couple of years. But other than that, he's been part of this team for a long time now. And I think you're right. Like that comfortability with it's like a family. They've been together for so long now. They've been through like the ups and the downs, and specifically the downs. So I think they're really able to appreciate when a team is really good, when everybody's bought in and pulling in the same direction. Like they all went through the Kyrie season. They know what that looks like and that felt like. That season, like the COVID year when we had half the roster that's off, that's out of the NBA now with Carson Edwards and Tristan Thompson and Jeff Teague. Like that always blows my mind that was like just 2 years ago. But I think there's an appreciation for
My
for
God, it
like
was.
yeah, like just for like this is great. Like you look around the league, these guys like appreciate we've got amazing people in the front office. We love Brad. Joe's come in. We're lucky enough to have spent our careers with guys that value winning and get wins. So I think yeah, they've got a shared goal. And they're kind of all on the same page from that perspective.
Well, look, this has been our debut episode of Celtics reporters in cars doing podcasts. But Jared, before we wrap up, we like to find out a little bit about our Celtics media friends before we wrap up. So a little bit about you before we go here. So you've covered the Celtics since 2011, but before joining the Athletic, back in college, you actually co-founded the CLNS Media Network and then went on to write the Celtics blog and USA Today. You also spent like 7 years working for the government, primarily as a compliance bank regulator, if my data is correct there. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started as a Celtics journalist, and is this something that you had wanted to do like growing up?
It's funny. I found something a couple of years ago. It was like my fourth grade yearbook, and I had written down my dream job as sports reporter. So
Nice.
um, that was a stupid wish because it's a terrible career path to pursue. But yeah, I guess it was something I always wanted to do. I went to college and studied political science, and I thought I was going to work for government. I did do that for a while. I wanted to get into like international diplomacy or something like that. And um, right towards the end of college is when I started to actually write more consistently. Was doing my podcast with CLNS, and then we actually got a credential to cover the team, so I was able to get in there and start covering. And I had no idea what the hell I was doing, but I kept doing it as I was graduating college and getting into the professional space as a someone trying to know what they were doing with their day job too. And I don't know when it got to the point that I thought it was a real career path, but I had this amazing access. I was getting the way I looked at it was I'm going to be watching the games anyway, and I'm going to be yelling at the TV, asking this guy like, why did you do that? So I might as well just go do it and ask them in person. So that's why I kept doing it. And eventually I started to see where there could be a path for me, but I was doing it because I just loved it. Because it was just so great to be behind the scenes of the game that I love and to see things up close and to learn about the game more. And eventually I realized I actually have a role to play there, even though it's a small role. But, I eventually started to understand how being a journalist can be actually beneficial. Because for me, for a long time, it just felt like I was just an entertainment reporter documenting what was going on. And eventually I started to learn about the power of storytelling and reporting. And so that's what got me to take it more seriously. And I was able to eventually turn it into a career.
That's
Have you got any pieces coming up that you want to plug to our billions of listeners while you're here?
Yes, tomorrow, I think it's dropping tomorrow. I have a feature. It's a bigger national story, but the Celtics will be in there too because the genesis of the story started in the Celtics locker room. But I can't give away too much, but it has to do with one of my favorite Instagram accounts, who makes NBA players into jokes and in a funny and simple way that makes it brilliant. And so
Awesome.
it turned out this person has a lot of fans throughout the league, and so I got to talk to a bunch of people that were big fans of his and really learn the story, and I thought it was really funny. So I can't wait for that one to drop on the Athletic.
Oh, cool. I imagine that this week gives you and other writers a chance to kind of get a bit of time to breathe and write something a little different from like the grind of like the day-to-day season.
Yeah, no, now this is the week to catch up on expenses and plan things out, and kind of like plan the stretch run.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, like we really appreciate you coming on and sharing that kind of stuff, because I think it's super interesting as we start out from kind of the ground floor here and make our little carve out our even tinier piece of role in the Celtics media world. So it's always cool to get the perspective of one of the larger voices in the Celtics community.
Yeah,
Appreciate
as
you saying
imagine,
that. You guys have a good show, and anything that's good, the more the more you push at it, the bigger it gets eventually.
To what extent, just to wrap up here, Jay, like to what extent are you still a fan of the team? Like I know in the media you're supposed to maintain some level of objectiveness. Like have you maintained your fandom throughout your work?
Not really. There's some reporters that still are outwardly fans or even quietly fans around the league. I remember when I was in school, when I found out I was going to start covering the team, I took a sports journalism class. And like the first day I said something about we, referring to the team because I was still a fan at that point. And the professor cut me off. He's like, don't ever say we again. They're they now. And I thought he was an idiot for saying that. I'm like, how could you say that? My passion is blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as I started covering the game, literally after the first day, I was like, oh my God, he was so right. And I haven't said we again ever since that moment. And so I'm a big Chelsea fan in the Premier League. So
Nice.
that's the one place where I catch myself saying we, but I honestly say they most of the time just out of habit. But I am no longer a fan of the Celtics or any team in the NBA. I really truly mean it when I say I'm just such a big NBA fan at this point. And I think a huge part of that is that I've developed relationships with people all over the league. Whether it's people that I developed relationships with in Boston that ended up going out elsewhere, or people from other places. And, like a lot of the people I talk to on a regular basis work for other teams or are players in other places, or people that, are friends with people from teams or players in other places. And so, my network is beyond Boston in a way that I find that like anytime there's a game, I know somebody that's on the other side of the coin. And so I think it's just like when you're covering it, it humanizes everything to the point that it no longer has the mystique to it. And so I think that just for some reason takes away the fandom within you. And so I've had people tell me that's sad, but honestly, I enjoy it more now because I think I have more personal stake or personal involvement within what's happening. And I know the people on a different level within what's happening. And so it makes me appreciate it and enjoy it more. I'm just not as hung up on the results.
Sure. So there's no part of you when it's game 6 in Milwaukee and Jayson Tatum's hit his 7th three that you're probably just goes, yes, Jayson, go on, son.
You're not popping the champagne if they win the title this year?
I mean, so you're not supposed to celebrate with them. I think it's weird because it's like, if these are people I know that I've been chronicling the whole year and they're winning the title, I'll enjoy it, but I'll enjoy it from the perspective of it's fun to see all these people that I know celebrating, and I'm happy for them. It's not it's not a celebration for me. I think I remember somebody took a photo, it was a reporter took a photo with a trophy, and people were looking down, and I'm like, well, we're all fans of the trophy. And it's you can take a photo with the trophy. It doesn't mean that you're rooting for the team that won it necessarily. You're just enjoying your moment you're enjoying this cool moment, and you have some small, incredibly part of it, which just as someone who's documenting it and someone who's documenting these moments and giving it to the masses for all the people that are fans, And so I think you can be involved with it while still maintaining your objectivity. And objectivity is imperfect, right? Because we all have our relationships, and you're not perfectly sterile in your objectivity. And so it doesn't mean that you're biased, but it means that it means that your relationships inform the information you have and inform the way you see things, and so you can't be perfectly clinically objective like an AI would be.
Sure.
So when ChatGPT is covering the league instead of me, trying to replace, then maybe it'll be perfectly objective. But I find that like when Jayson Tatum won the game in game 6, I was excited because it means I get to keep working and I get to go to Miami and then San Francisco eventually, and and get my airline miles up and stuff like that. But beyond even just all the fun of that stuff, I got to be along for a finals run, and it's incredibly exciting and fun to be there for it. Because I'm rooting for the Celtics in so much as that, like, I want to keep working and keep seeing all the fun stuff and be there for it. But at the end of the day, I didn't care whether the Celtics won the championship or not. I just cared that everybody got their up. Like, I wanted to see the people that I knew get a fair shot at it, and I feel bad for them that they didn't win, but I still enjoyed it all the same.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear it from that perspective, I find personally, because we do this little operation here at cost, and it's our personal fandom that drives it. So it's really interesting to hear that perspective from the professional standpoint there. Look, Jared, you've clearly arrived at your destination there. It looks like we're departing, but
I actually have to move to a different place than my destination. So
look, if you're listening to the audio podcast after the fact, like, go to about the 30-minute mark of this podcast, and there's some really impressive parallel parking maneuverability
so
there
elite.
from Jared. Look, that is going to do it for this one. We will be back on Thursday night right after the Pacers game, so keep an eye on our channel here for that stream, and plenty of spicy matchups on the horizon, so it's going to be a fun, if not slightly stressful month here for Celtics fans. Jared Weiss, this is awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on. And we've well timed. I think we've just
this
lost
has been great,
there.
guys. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for putting up with me driving.
Of course, no worries. We're just helpful and thankful rather to have you on. Jake Eisenberg, as always, thanks to you. Go Celtics. Until next time, peace.